Warren Moon played 23 seasons of professional football, 6 in the Canadian Football League, followed by 17 in the National Football League, where he threw for nearly 50,000 yards, played till he was the age of 44. And Warren, we haven't talked in a while. Have you keep him busy?
It's been different, Paul, and I'm sure it's been different for you. And a lot of my life is on the road, going different places, traveling around, having different meetings, different speaking engagements, different appearances and things like that. So all that just came to a halt. So for me, it was very different. And I think my biggest concern was my kids, making sure that they were taken care of, making sure they were safe. And then my young 13-year-old, trying to keep him motivated and not spending too much time on the computer, not spending too much time with video games, trying to keep him active. So he's kind of worn my arm out because he's a wide receiver and he loves playing catch. So I've done a lot of that. I've probably thrown the ball more than I've wanted to, but it's kept me in pretty good shape too, because that's something that I think I'm sure affected everybody was eating too much while you're sitting around, laying around, watching a lot of television. I probably watched more TV than I've watched in my life during that time, as far as Netflix and all those different things. So some of that was enjoyable, but I'd rather get back to what I normally used to doing.
Man. And there's really no end in sight, huh, for you? Like, you don't know when you'll be able to get back to that.
Well, I'm doing a little bit of it, and I found out that traveling isn't as dangerous or difficult as you might think it would be, because the airlines are doing a very good job of making sure the planes are clean. They're practicing as much social distancing on the plane as they can. If you're in first class, nobody's sitting next to you unless you're traveling with someone. And if you're in coach, nobody's in the middle seat. So they're trying to keep people away from each other. Then you wear a mask the whole time you're on the flight unless you have a drink or something like that. So other than that, it's a pretty safe experience, and I've had no problem so far.
Let's talk about college football, Warren. 1978 Rose Bowl MVP, 3 seasons with the Huskies back then in what was the Pac-8. And now the Pac-12 and Big Ten have canceled their fall sports seasons, and a lot of athletes are missing out. What are your feelings about the cancellation of the fall sports?
It's really unfortunate, especially for all those young athletes, because, some of those guys have pro aspirations. A lot of them, this is probably going to be the last time they ever play college football or play football in their lives, because maybe they're not good enough to go pro, but they're good enough to play on a college team as a senior or whatever. So all that's kind of be taken away from them. I understand the reasons why they're doing it, for health reasons, especially the way the pandemic has infected and impacted California and also Arizona, where half of the conference is in those 2 states. But I just thought the players, based off of what I've been hearing and what I think teams are able to do as far as their facilities, I think those facilities would be good enough to house those young guys. The biggest responsibility is going to be once they leave those facilities in the afternoon or early evening, when they're done with their day. Then what happens to them? Can they be responsible enough to keep themselves in situations where they don't get themselves infected by the virus? I thought it was something that they should at least have tried. And because they didn't even give it a try, and maybe if it didn't work, then you break it down and tear it down. At least give the players an opportunity to show that they can be responsible. But it was almost like they were saying, no, you guys aren't going to be responsible, so we're not going to take this chance. And I think the SEC has done that, the ACC has done that, and the Big 12 has done that. And I'm sure if things get out of hand there as far as the infections, they'll shut theirs down too, but at least give the players an opportunity to see if they can make this work.
So you really believe the players should have had a voice in this whole thing too?
I think so, yeah. I think the players, and they've tried to express their voice in a lot of different ways. There's been some committees established by players off of some other things that they want to be seen done, which is like having their naming rights, having their rights to their likenesses, different things like that. So there's different subjects that these players are very, very adamant about, and they want to see changes. And I thought this should have been a place they should have had at least a little bit of a voice as well.
Well, if you look at the SEC, ACC, Big 12, Warren, are you optimistic and think that maybe they'll be able to get through their complete schedule?
I'm not sure. again, you're talking about 18 to 20-year-olds that have a lot of free time sometimes on their hands, especially when school does come back into play. And being a college student, part of being a college student is socializing, and you're going to socialize with a lot of different people. Can you ask these young guys to stay as isolated as they're going to need to be over the next 3 months in order to make this thing happen? I'm really not sure if every guy can do that, because you're talking about hundreds and thousands of young kids. So we'll see, but at least they're giving it a try. And if it doesn't work, like I said, Paul, you can always shut it down and just stop the season before anything gets any worse. But at least give the kids an opportunity to show that they can be responsible.
Let's talk NFL. Washington football team hires Jason Wright as the first NFL team black president. And it's just like, when you look at that hire, Warren, what are your thoughts about Jason Wright as the president of Washington?
I thought it was a very good hire for the Redskins. First of all, he's a former player, so he knows that side of it. He also was part of the Players Association, so he knows, the working sides of labor part of it. And then he's been a very, very successful businessman in corporate America, and he lives in the Washington, D.C. area, so he's got a lot of ties to what's already going on there. He's going to be more on the business side of the organization. Ron Rivera running the football side of it, but I think what Dan Snyder has tried to do is change the culture and change the environment there in Washington. That was probably a pretty toxic environment from what I understand. But now he has a minority head coach, and now he has a minority president in his organization. So I think they're on the right track as far as taking care of what the Rooney Rule is supposed to talk about, as far as giving more opportunities to African Americans and minorities. And I think these two guys are going to come in there and kind of change the culture of the Redskins.
When they dropped the team name, was that something that was just long overdue?
Well, long overdue. I think, some of the other names that are out there, like the Braves and the Chiefs and things like that, I don't think those names are offensive to the Native Indian groups. But when you start talking about Redskins and things like that, that's more of a slur, I think, and it's definitely time to get that done. Even the team that I used to play for in Edmonton, the Edmonton Eskimos, they have a name change coming too. So it's something that's really being looked at and really being considered by these organizations, and I'm glad they're making those changes.
What are your feelings about that, Warren? Because is there a point where there's too much analysis of these things, and maybe some of these team names should be just left alone?
Yeah, there might be a little bit of too much sensitivity, but what might not be offensive to you or might not be offensive to me could be offensive to somebody else. So like with the Eskimos case, the indigenous people, I guess, feel like that name is a slur to them. And that's something that they've been looking at over the years too as well. And they finally, because of the climate of what's going on in the world, had to make that change. But there is a lot of sensitivity out there, but that's just something we have to live with right now with what we're going through.
Well, you would know. I mean, you were up there in the late 70s and quarterbacked that Edmonton team to 6 Grey Cups, won 5 of them, a couple of MVPs. But you're right. It is not the late 70s anymore, and it's just interesting to see that even the reach to the CFL, they're analyzing things and looking at things.
Yeah, they're looking at things all over, especially this country and of course now Canada. But I think it's something that's needed to be done for a long time. It's just kind of been overlooked. But I think because of all the uprising with all the protests that have been going on over the last so many months, with all the racial injustice and the police brutality and all those things being brought to the forefront, all these different subjects are now starting to come out, and they're all being addressed. And it's high time they are being addressed.
Let's talk about some action on the field. Seahawks have announced that they are not going to allow fans inside CenturyLink Field for the first 3 home games. As a player, how does that affect the player's performance, do you think?
There's no question the fans bring out an extra amount of energy for players, especially on the home team side. And there's some players that get off on it as far as visitors. I used to love to go out on the road and make another crowd quiet or make another crowd boo their other team boo their home team and things like that. So there's a motivation for even the visiting team to come in and try and hear all the hype about Century League Stadium and then all of a sudden make them all quiet. So there's a challenge there. So I think the fans play a big, big part in professional sports, and to not have them in the stands is going to really make the game different. There's no question about it. That doesn't mean the players won't go out there and play hard and compete hard, because once you get that guy in front of you, you really block what the fans are doing out of your mind on that one given play. But they do add an element to the whole production of a NFL game, and it's too bad that these fans won't be able to watch their football team play in person, because they're a big part of what makes this team successful sometimes.
Well, when you played, especially at that quarterback position, how dialed in were you once you got out there for that first series? I would imagine, as most top athletes, you're so dialed in that whether they're booing or they're cheering, you're on a mission.
Yeah, you really are. And don't get me wrong, you do get affected by the crowd some, especially when it comes to communicating at the line of scrimmage as a quarterback. You're trying to get, plays changed, protections made, different things like that. And the crowd can be a nuisance sometime in making that happen. That's one of the reasons why you always go on the road. You always want to get ahead in the game early so you can take that crowd and that energy out of the football game, which just makes your job easier to be able to communicate for everybody, not just my job. The offensive linemen are communicating up front. The wide receivers have to see all these signals and make sure they're getting them right. So the crowd makes a big difference. But as far as them bothering me as far as how I'm playing, I think only the defense can do that.
I would imagine. How about some of these NFL players that are opting out of the season? If you were a player and the situation as it is right now with COVID, do you think you would have opted out?
I doubt it. I love the game too much. I mean, you saw how long I played. I played until my body just said no more. When you play 23 years of ball and go through going to a different country to play and playing at different teams in the NFL, you just love the game. So I don't think I was going to let something like a virus, stop me from playing. Even though I had a family, I'm going to look at, how the team and the organization is going to protect all the players to make sure that we have a great environment. And then I'm going to try and be responsible when I leave that facility in the evening to make sure I don't bring anything, back home to my family. So, yeah, I probably would have played just knowing all the different circumstances.
How much is it, Warren, when, that's your personal opinion, but how much of it is because there's no better team game on the planet than football? I would imagine there's a little bit of that. I don't want to let my teammates down too, especially guys I've been with for years.
Right. That's definitely there, but I think guys are thinking more of the bigger picture. They're thinking of their families. There could be pre-existing conditions, in their family that we don't know about. There could be, maybe they have small kids or a wife might be pregnant, or we don't know what all the reasons why a guy might opt out and not want to play under these conditions. So I have total respect for the guys that actually do that. But if it was me, based off of what I know about what I was doing throughout my career, everybody in my family was healthy at the time, so I didn't have to worry about anything like that. Now, if my wife was pregnant, I talked to the medical professionals about it and all that to make sure I got all the information. But just knowing what I knew, I would probably play.
When you look at the rest of the NFL, and I'm sure that to some degree you're following what goes on, especially with other quarterbacks. Tom Brady leaves New England, goes to Tampa Bay. What are your thoughts about him playing out his career, it looks like, in Tampa?
Well, it's amazing that he was able to play in one place for 20 years. You just don't see many players staying in one place that long. So he was fortunate to do that, but he's one of those guys that just has the ability to play a little bit longer than most. And here he is at 43 years old, where New England, on the other side of it, we're looking at probably we need to start looking for the future, because at some point Tom Brady's not going to be able to, play the way he's played for us in the past. And if you look at his numbers over the last 3 years, they've gone down. So it's too bad that he didn't end up there, because he's just a part of the Patriots and the Patriots way. But again, most players in this league, if they play over 10 years in one place, they're probably going to end their career somewhere else, just because that's the way the game is kind of laid out. That they're always looking for the younger, less expensive, just as talented player, and that's the way the game is. I remember when I was in Houston, I had gone to the Pro Bowl 6 years in a row. I was in my 10th year in Houston. We had gone 12-4 that year. and I got traded to the Minnesota Vikings because they felt like my backup was ready to take over as the starting quarterback, and salary cap was a big issue at that time. So I can see it happening. And when I saw Joe Montana get traded to the Kansas City Chiefs after leading the 49ers to 4 Super Bowls, I knew anybody in this league was expendable.
No question. Yeah, 10 years in Houston. I guess the Vikings were pretty happy that Houston said enough and let you go to the Vikings, because you had a couple solid years there too.
Yeah, I understand the reason for the Oilers, but I just told them that, I still had some good football left in my body. I just felt that way, but they didn't know at 37 years old how much more time I could keep playing at that level. And I had played 16 years at that time. You got to remember, I had played 6 years in Canada and 10 years in Edmonton. In Houston. So that was a long time for me to be playing the game. I was surprising myself how I was able to play at that age, but I went on and played another 7 seasons, and the guy that they replaced me with played 1 more year, and he was out of the league. So they didn't make the right decision in that case.
Are we protecting that guy's name?
Yeah, we're protecting it.
Well, that's the beauty of it. Like, Tom Brady's 43. You played when you were 44, back when, all of these, the TB12 method wasn't even around. So, and you were still productive at 44, Warren. That says something about your longevity.
Yeah, I really took good care of myself. I didn't have the TB12 program that he has right now. I wasn't eating avocado ice cream and stuff like that, but I took pretty good care of myself. Stayed away from any major injuries, which Tom has done too. I think the last time he was really injured was 2008 when he tore his knee up or something like that. Other than that, he hasn't been knocked around very much because of the offense that he's in. So he doesn't take a lot of big shots, gets the ball out of his hands very quickly, reads the defenses very quickly. So that's allowed him to play a long time, that offense that they built for him. So hopefully Bruce Arians is going to do the same thing in Tampa, where they're going to make sure he has the same type of offense where the learning curve for him isn't that big, and he knows how to get rid of the football, and he knows where to go with it quickly, and that's a big reason why he hasn't taken a lot of punishment.
You worked with Cam Newton quite a bit, mentored him, and now he's over in New England. What do you think his chances are, and what do you see with his relationship with Bill Belichick and basically trying to resurrect his career as far as Cam Newton goes?
Yeah, that's going to be a work in progress for both Cam and for the Patriots, because, again, the Patriots have been in this one offense for the last 20 years with Tom Brady. Now they're trying to go to an offense that has a little bit more quarterback movement into it. They're probably going to be calling some quarterback runs and things like that they were never able to do with Tom Brady back there. So both sides are going through transition right now, and Cam's going to a very different environment than he's used to in Carolina, where Bill Belichick, we all know about him. Everybody is basically on the same level when you're with the Patriots. Nobody's treated any differently. So that's going to be different for Cam, because in some ways Cam was coddled a little bit there in Carolina and wasn't criticized very much by the organization or by the coaching staff. He will hear criticism while he's there in New England. So how does he handle all that? So it's a transition for everybody, but I think Cam looks at it as a opportunity to be with a solid organization, to be with a winning organization. Now he just has to make the adjustments to the environment and also to the offense that he's going to be running.
Well, the great players, the Hall of Famers like yourself, they'll say that they want to be coached and coached hard. How true is that, Warren?
I think it's pretty true for most guys. There's no question about it. And the quarterback position is definitely going to be coached a little bit differently than other positions in some ways. I mean, you heard all the scuttlebutt from Richard Sherman and a lot of the other defensive players years ago about Russell Wilson. They didn't feel like he was being criticized enough, in front of the team, in front of meetings and things like that about different mistakes he makes in games. Well, that's just not how you coach your quarterbacks. Quarterbacks are usually told about their mistakes in their quarterback room, in their quarterback meetings, not in front of the whole football team, because you as a leader of the team, you don't want to be torn down in front of the rest of the team. So they keep it more behind closed doors, but that doesn't mean you're not hearing any type of criticism or the mistakes that you make. So the quarterback position is just a little bit different than the other positions on the team.
What's the hardest thing that Brady, Newton, and some of these other quarterbacks that are going to new teams, what's the hardest thing? Is it learning the system?
No, I don't think the system is going to be as hard. I think it's more just learning your new teammates, because as a quarterback, you're almost like a psychologist on your team. And you know every guy, and you try and know everybody's personalities. You want to know which buttons to push on certain guys. You want to know your wide receivers. Who do I have to get involved in the game early in order to keep them motivated? Who can I not maybe have to throw the football too early, but know he's going to do all the right things. So all those different things, when you come into a new team, you have to learn, 53 guys. And when you first get there, you have to learn probably 80 or 90 guys until they cut down. So that's the biggest thing to me is learning your new teammates and what makes them tick and what their strengths and weaknesses are, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because that's where you spend all your time.
All right, we've talked before. I marvel at your career, at the way you were able to play until you were 44. And I think even in your last season with the Chiefs, you completed 50% of your passes in a game, a couple of games that you played there. When you're an aging quarterback, Warren, what's the first thing to go? Is it your arm, your legs, your mind? What is it?
Your mind stays sharp. Your arm is pretty much the same. It's just your legs, because your legs not only have a lot to do with you being able to move around, but they also help you throw the football. To get your legs in proper position, a lot of your velocity comes from your legs, and that's something that you had to worry about, especially myself later in my career, how much wear and tear I was going to have on my body over the course of the season. You felt like at the end of the season, those last 4 or 5 weeks, that's when you started to feel a little bit of fatigue come in. And so you had to make sure you weren't getting too many reps in practice, making sure you were eating right, making sure you were getting your rest and your treatment, because you tended to get a little bit worn down at that time of the season. So that's something I'm worried about with Tom Brady, especially going from the cold weather up in New England down to that heat and humidity in Tampa Bay. It can tend to wear your body down a little bit more over the course of a long season. So that's something he's going to have to adjust to. But yeah, the legs were the big thing for me. When those start to go, that's when you know you better get out of the game, because if you can't protect yourself and move around and be able to get away from danger, you can get killed out there.
Well, I would imagine that as you talk about it, the mind is probably the last thing, because I bet you sitting here today, you feel like you could still go out there and play, at least read defenses and be able to operate.
Yeah, and be able to get the ball out of your hand. But it's a far cry from being able to get out there and physically do it. But your mind is what kept me playing a lot longer than I did, because I knew everything. I saw it. I had seen everything. I had seen every possible defense. I had been through 4 or 5 different offenses. So none of that learning was hard for me. When I got up to the football, I kind of knew what was going to happen before the snap of the football, and that's a big advantage. But if your body physically is not going to allow you to get that done the way you want to get it done and as quickly as you need to get it done, that's when your game is starting to diminish a little bit.
Okay, 10 years in Houston, 3 years in Minnesota, 2 years in Seattle, 2 years in Kansas City. So you stayed in those type of markets. What was I won't say the best city that you played in, but what about the best team you ever played for, the most memorable time you had playing in the NFL?
I thought the best 2 teams that I played with were in Houston. I think our 93 team and our 91 team. Those 2 teams I thought had the ability to go to a Super Bowl. We had other teams that went to the playoffs, but I didn't think we were good enough maybe to go all the way. You would have just had to get hot at the right time. But those 2 teams, I was more disappointed that we didn't go further, just because I thought they were talented enough, and we had enough guys who had been together for a while that we probably should have made a better run. But so those are the 2 that I think were the best teams I played on.
If you still look and Google Warren Moon's name, it's still one of the things they still say about you is the fact that you threw the tightest spiral in the NFL. And when people rank spirals, you're still there in that top 3, top 5 ranking. And I think it was Chris Carter who said you used to basically walk the ball to him because it was just such a sweet pass. Where did that come from, Warren? Was that natural ability, or is that just something – did anybody teach you how to throw the football back in the day?
Nobody really taught me how to throw it, but I was definitely given instructions how to throw. And then a lot of it just came through practice. I mean, just tons and tons of throwing the football. And like you said, some of it was God-given. I think anybody who has physical athletic ability, a certain part of it is God-given. And then you take it to the next level. How much are you willing to develop that and work as hard as you possibly can to become the best player that you can be? So my thing was to always work, to try and outwork everybody else that I was competing against, because I never felt like I was a great athlete, some guy that could run a 4.4 40 or vertical leap, 40 inches or anything like that. But, I was a competent athlete that happened to play quarterback. So I could do some things that other quarterbacks couldn't do as far as being able to move around. I could throw the ball really well on the run. I ran well enough just to keep the chains moving, but I wasn't some dynamic guy like a Lamar Jackson or a Michael Vick or somebody like that. And then as I got older in my career and smarter, I felt like, okay, I better stop running this football or I'm gonna get my head taken off. So let me start just being a distributor, like a point guard in basketball. Let these guys catch it, and they can make the moves and they can take the hits, and I'll just sit back there and watch them work.
When we talk about that, you talk about getting your head taken off. I always like to pick your brain about the hardest hit you took, but we've talked about it. I can't remember who it was, but who hit you the hardest in your career?
Man, there's some of those license plates I didn't even get when I got hit sometimes, because I was still trying to turn my helmet and try to see out the front of my helmet. I was looking out the ear hole some of the times. But there was a guy by the name of Carlos Jenkins who was a linebacker with the Minnesota Vikings. He wasn't a big guy, about 230 pounds, but really fast. And he had an all-out blitz on me that nobody, the running back missed his protection on it, turned the wrong way and turned to the left, and Carlos was coming from my right. I thought I was protected because that's who he was supposed to block. So I had no idea he was coming. I'm looking the opposite direction, and he hit me right in my sternum. The ball went one way, I went the other way. They picked it up and ran it for a touchdown, and I was out of that game. I had bruised ribs on that play, and it was probably the hardest I've ever been hit. And there's times when I get a massage right now, and my masseuse hits that area, I still feel that area. I still feel that pain in there, that cartilage.
That is amazing. That after so many years,
that was
still feel
30 years ago or 25 years ago, whatever it was.
Well, I'm laughing at it because it didn't happen to me, and I'm sorry. But, man, that's a great story, though. Like, do you ever look for that hit on YouTube or anywhere?
No, I never want to see it again. And, Paul, I remember when I stopped doing the game, I thought I was going to take some time off and just relax, but I got bored. So I started doing some sideline reporting for Westwood One Radio. And I watched the game from the sideline for the first time as just an average person, not a player. And when I saw how fast those guys were playing, and I've only been out of the game 6 months now, right? And I'm seeing these collisions and I'm seeing the speed. And I'm saying to myself, how did I ever do that? And what was I ever thinking for wanting to even want to do that? The game is so fast and so physical. And I always tell everybody, if you think you can play the game of football, try and get you a spot on the sideline and watch the game for about 2 series. You'll quickly say, no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, but at the same time, Warren, when you see a contract that Mahomes signed and you're like, you might want to think about playing.
They'll think about playing until they see the actual physical contact out there. I mean, that will make a lot of brave men become cowards. I guarantee you.
Yeah, Zoom interviews are much safer, huh?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I just marvel at some of the shots I was able to take and still be able to get up.
And here we are years later. You can still put together sentences and sound smart. So everything's working for you, Warren.
I still throw the football with my son. I'm still able to go out and throw the ball with him in the park because he's a young wide receiver and he wants to play catch all the time. And I'm still able to throw him the football with a little bit of velocity.
Hey, he's learning from one of the best for sure. He's fortunate to have you throwing that football and giving him some tips as he enters into that crucial learning period. At that age, you learn a lot about that game.
Yeah, I'm really sad that he's not being able to play this year because he played for Bellevue Pop Warner League, and that was his first year last year, and he had a really good season. And he wanted to play at least 2 years of Pop Warner before he goes to Bellevue High School and plays. So this year is probably going to be wiped out unless they come back and play in the spring or something like that. But I'm really sad that he's not able to get out there and compete, because it's been tough on all young people. They just haven't been able to be as active as they want to be right now. And that's something that you worry about in your young kids, because there's so many other things that they can get caught up with in their mind with the way the internet is, and they're having their phones all the time. You want them to stay as physically active as they possibly can to keep some of that attention off of what they might be watching on their phones.
Well, you bring that up, and I'll ask you this one last question. A lot of coaches and players are conflicted on whether they can there could be a spring football season and then another season in the fall. So basically 2 seasons within 1 calendar year. Is it possible to do that successfully?
I don't think so. I don't think the quality of what you would see in the spring would be what you want, because I think a lot of the top players would opt out to get ready for the NFL draft. And then I think it's too much on the body of these young guys to ask them to come out and play 2 seasons within 1 year. You wouldn't even ask the pros to do that. So yeah, I think it's a little bit too much to ask young guys to do that. And then also the quality of the game. You want to make sure the quality of college football is at its peak when you play it. And it wouldn't be that when you're missing a lot of the top players on every team around the country who wouldn't want to play because they're jeopardizing their opportunity to go play pro ball.
Yeah, I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out for sure. Well, this has been awesome, Warren. I really appreciate you making the time, and it's been great catching up with you, and I'm looking forward already to doing it again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this season, and it should be a good one, and I look forward to talking to you again. Tell everybody at the station I said hello.
Will do. All right, thanks a lot, Warren.
All right, man, take care.